It's been called the biggest change in 25 years, and people are even saying, is there any point in having a website anymore? Google have just rebuilt the front door of the internet, and that's what we're going to talk about today. You're listening to the AI Moment with me, Jonathan Wagstaff.
Me, Danny Denhard. So, Jonathan, that was a bit of a tasty intro for our listeners. So, what we're referring to is Google's latest I/O, and let's call it as it is. This is Google's coming out party for AI, and one of the reasons why it's so big is it's going to disrupt how Google search works. Essentially, it's going to become an AI search engine and not show the 10 blue links. And they obviously released AI across every part of their product suite. So should we dive in?
Let's do that. I mean, the way to describe it for those who haven't seen it, you're all used to the Google search page, and you type in your 2 or 3 keywords and you get your 10 blue links, as Dan says, or maybe some ads on the right-hand side. New version, what you're effectively doing is you're typing in the sort of question that you might type into an LLM. So it comes up as a Google search engine. You type your question, and what you get down the left-hand side, the 2/3 of the page, is an LLM-style long-form answer that answers your question. And then on the right, there are citation links, which is where it got its information from. But this is a completely different style of Google answer than we're used to. And you certainly don't get the 10 blue clickable links anymore. So that's clearly changing the way the game has been played. Dan, what's your first take on it? We've only seen it for a couple of days. We're just reacting to first impressions. What have you got?
From a search first perspective, this is Google telling everyone and putting us on notice, essentially, that we're going to have to start playing their version of the LLM game. So if you use Claude, ChatGPT, etc., the same rules apply now on Google. So less clicks, less referral traffic, more citations, better, longer form answers is what they're suggesting. With some of the other recommendations, it's all a play to be the single point of contact for online shopping and shopping in general. So that's their much broader play. There's a lot of other recommendations that we could make, but one of the core takeaways or ripples it's going to have within businesses is, how do we as business owners, or how do we as marketeers or salespeople, how do we start really rethinking and reshaping our activities to play the new Google game as opposed to the old one? So we're in the UK, so we're fairly lucky that we don't always get the first rollout. We're sort of after the beta rollout in some of the core markets. How would you start tackling this, or with some of your coaching clients and some of your e-com and digital style clients? What would your recommendations be to tackle this rollout, Jonathan?
I think, well, one of the things I think they've done, quite cleverly, how do you get people to adapt a new technology at any time? Well, you try and make it look as much as possible like one that they're used to. So you try and take the technology into the space that they're used to being. And Google have used this time to leverage their install base already. We all, by default, pull up, the Google website, the Google search engine. We've all done that. We've been, there are people working now who've done that since they were 4 years old, because they're 25 years old and they've known nothing but. So Google are quite clever in that they've said, well, okay, that's where people go by default. So now we're going to put the same technology that ChatGPT, Claude, and the others have got, but we're putting it into a place you already are going to go. So that means that by default, you're going to use that technology, and you're going to use our technologies, you say, Dan. What that means for marketers is, anybody who's serious about marketing in the last 12 months cannot have missed the movement and the conversations constantly around, you're going to need to understand LLMs better. You're going to need to be producing content, etc., that LLMs will find as they come and look for you. But I think there may have been a sluggishness in some parts of various industries where it's like, okay, I know I'm going to get to that one day, but right now I'm still getting plenty of good results on my traditional search, and that's all okay. And so I can get to LLMs in time. And I think by this change, which Google will roll out globally this summer, that's a step change suddenly. There's no option anymore. Once this thing's rolled out everywhere, there's no option to have your old SEO tradition with your 10 blue links and stuff. So any thinking marketers were doing about that has got to accelerate really, really rapidly. So then it becomes, what were the things that people were saying anyway about what you've got to do with your content? And we've talked about this. You kind of, you've got to be thinking around um, how AI will present what it will present. And that means it's not going to be, you can't rank fourth or 20th. You're either getting mentioned or you're not, or you're getting cited or you're not. So the way the thing's going to work is it's going to mention some organizations in its answer if it's relevant, and it's going to cite one or two others in the sources that it's used. And if you're not in one of those two places, you've had it. So we've got to go back to what are the things we talk about more generally, and we'll get to them later in terms of how you make your content more AI visible. That's my first reaction, Dan, but it's just what it's done is it's accelerated some stuff we knew we were going to have to do anyway, and it's made it much more important that we get that right.
Couldn't agree more. There's going to be a number of shifts. There's going to be a number of fundamental shifts that happen, and these aren't all going to happen at once. So I think now, from calling it SEO, it's probably best to start referring to things as AI search and not just search engine optimization. People are very slow at reacting, but I think this time is probably best to maybe take a step back to understand what's happening, how things are truly working, and then tackle it as an organization wide shift and rebalance, and as a problem that you attack all together as opposed to in silos as before. And I've got an article that's coming out, and I'll share it in the show notes around that, and a guide to help when I've asked sort of 5 industry friends and experts what to do and how to treat it. The fundamentals of and search engine optimization will still work. But what we're going to go from is tracking is going to become much harder. And a number of different external experts are suggesting that you don't have to track traffic, you don't have to track some of the older way of doing it. This is a fundamental misunderstanding of what's going to happen. You're going to still get some traffic, not as much. It's going to be harder to achieve, but it's going to be far more convertible, far more further down the funnel. And actually mid funnel is probably going to happen above you. And then a lot of decisions and shape of decisions are going to happen before they've even got to your website. So it's even more important now to have the right style of content, and rather picking up the phone and doing calls or going through a much more rigorous sales cycle or marketing conversion funnel, now it's going to be far more important that you have that content and have bottom of funnel content on your website so it can understand who you are, what you do, why you're the best in the market, and deliver that. So there's some people that are suggesting things that won't matter anymore. It's actually going to be far more important, and you understand where you're going to be and in that marker. We've spoke about this before. We've referenced it a number of times. So brand clarity is going to be really important. Differentiation is going to be really important. The way LLMs and AI and Google are going to understand the shape of your company and your brand is going to be vitally, vitally important. So if you're not investing in that space and you're not doing something that's differentiated and new, it's going to be very difficult for you to just have a content play that convinces Google and new equivalent search engines and LLM engines to come out to do that. So there are a couple of important areas.
Yeah, I think that what you lead on to quite nicely there is a couple of things. One is probably a good thing. Well, definitely a good thing. I think this will render AI slop very, very useless. And so hopefully that will mean we get less AI slop being produced in terms of content, because the way you're going to differentiate, I think, is to have content and information that you share, which is either original or unique or super helpful in answering certain questions that your customers may have. So depth of content, how specific your content is. Have you got some good original data? They're going to be the pieces, I think, that start to render you different from a lot of your competition. And they'd be the places where you might get AI citation because you're doing something a bit unique or different. And so you've got to think then about how do we generate that kind of stuff that's unique to us or rare to us, and it's important to our customers, and it would be useful to AI. And then the second thing, and again, this is no news, is that just filling your website with that stuff is no longer going to play. You've got to be visible. You've got to be on YouTube. You've got to be on LinkedIn. Maybe you've got PR going on that you're in more national journals or more national broadcast or so you've got to be in a number. He's got to see you in a number of places and go, yeah, this person is serious about this subject because I can see them at various points around the internet. Those things were kind of happening anyway, and I think they're accelerated in that.
I agree. And also, I think if you're a smaller organization or a smaller business, word of mouth and referral, if you want to take the other route, you want to go the around AI or take an adjacent route to AI, is word of mouth and referrals and product recommendations through other people are going to be vitally important because they're the sorts of areas you can own and won't be controlled as much by Google. They might do reputational search and look you up, but actually these are traditional channels and traditional methods of businesses that can and always will get that referral, the word of mouth and product recommendations, etc. The thing I've been suggesting to a couple of businesses more recently is if you feel like you're smaller or you can't scale that content like we were just recommending, going out and becoming and creating really bespoke information that other people can share on your behalf is going to be really important. If you can empower people to share content on your behalf and get them to be your advocates, I believe that is going to be one of the most important ways to work with and adjacently to these big AI changes that are coming. And as Jonathan rightly said at the beginning, this is something that is coming, and this is our first reaction, not an emergency pod, but our first reaction to it. These are ways that we're having these conversations and these making these recommendations. This all might change in a week's time if we record again in a week's and when we record again in a week's time. But these are all really important facets and places that you can control and don't feel like you're not in control of change.
Well, I think your point about referrals and advocacy, I've said for a long time, I think that's an underused channel, particularly if you're in a business below 50 million turnover. The chances are a lot of your customers have come via word of mouth, referral, advocacy, people talking to each other about you, the reputation you've built. Most organizations aren't actually systemizing that. And there's a huge missed opportunity in lots of businesses in just in not taking that as a random thing, but actually systemizing how you manage referrals and manage advocacy. So I think that's been true for a while. I think the changes here put it on steroids. And actually linked to that, Dan, quite interestingly, a couple of business leaders I've spoken to in the last couple of weeks have said their cold outreach operations have completely collapsed this spring because people have all now got AI email filter systems in place and AI call manager systems in place. And so your ability to cold outreach an individual who does not want to be spoken to have really dropped to pretty much zero. So again, you're back to what are the things that work? The things that work are advocacy we just talked about, and also producing things like content that make people want to come to you because it's interesting, unique, and it solves their problem. So these things just all get turbocharged. You and I have both been fans for a long time of this approach, but that all gets turbocharged now. I think it gets really, really interesting.
My strong recommendation is you're going to have to become the universe. So you're going to have this universe, brand universe around you. So your website or wherever your default property is in the middle. And then you're going to have to connect channels and activities and that together and drive people back to the place that you want them to convert on. So whether that's a phone call, whether that's a slide deck, whether that's a video, whether that's a website, you need to decide what is at the center of your universe and what the planets around that are going to be and how you're going to drive them specifically to that hub, that home and hub. Because, and I'll give you a quick rundown of some of the other features that Google were announced. So there's an ask interface in Maps and YouTube. So now it's much better at serving you locally and discovering better content, how-to content, and it's going to give you answers without having to watch content. That's something that I use my AI browsers for, but that's something they've built in to it. So that's going to be harder for you to expect people are going to, really consume your content. Documents are going to be live and voice activated. So there's going to be much better drafting for leaders. There's going to be much better notes meeting information presentations created by voice and by interactions. They've announced a load of different Gemini features, which are going to mean that much better tools, and you can start building internal tools. They've started to build Gemini Spark, which is their information agents. And that is something that we'd be remiss not to talk around. They've talked around AI native search and universal cart, and that's the thing that people are going to get bitten by, because this is their clearest message that agentic is going to be something that they kick off, and that's going to connect your Gmail, your search, your YouTube, and all your Gemini activity together and try and surface information and purchase through one agent. They're doing loads of stuff through different apps. They're releasing new Android. They're releasing glasses. They're releasing new tiers on Gemini, and these like high-end tiers. So there's a huge amount of change coming, and they've been the smartest at building their ecosystem, their universe, and expanding out with Gemini in the middle as opposed to search being in the middle, relying on ads. Now they've flipped that model, and it's far more to subscription and completions. So do more for the user is how they've been talking in their press.
Yeah, and I think that, that reflects what you and I were talking about back last September, October. We were saying, we could see how Google might well win in 2026 because they got this hinterland of things, their whole search index history and some of the other applications and utilities they got. And that if they could pull that together, that could give them a huge advantage. I think we're seeing that play out, Dan. And actually, it's going places we never even thought. There's a real strong sense you get that they've had a look at Amazon and gone, we'll be taking some of that online e-commerce business. That Amazon is too big and it's about time somebody took a chunk off them. Clearly, Bezos isn't going to stand still and let that happen. So there's probably quite a fight there, but you can see those sort of things. And I think you're right. There's a whole, I've not got nearly to exploring the set of things that have been announced yet. And so it might take us time to do that, but there's going to be some interesting things. I'd also say, I think voice is really taking off this spring and summer. Lots of third party Whisper and all these other voice apps coming out. They're very, very high quality, AI based. You talk into it and it understands and parses what you're saying much better than they used to. So lots of people I know have been prolific writers saying that they're doing it all on voice now. They're using voice as the vehicle by which they can write, because you can write while you're driving along in the car, right? Or you can write just 2 minutes thought when it just comes to you and you do it on your phone. So that I think is maybe a subject for another pod, another day. One thing to finish on from my side, I think. So what do people do about all this new rapid accelerated change? Well, one of the things you can start with is do some kind of audit of, think about the questions that your buyer, so back to Dan's point about knowing exactly who's buying from you, and then thinking about what would they ask? What would they ask an LLM? What would they ask the new Google search that might lead them to us? And then if you put those questions in, see where it does lead them. Does it lead them to you? Happy days. Or does it lead them to one of your competitors or somewhere else? Okay, then why? Let's have a look at why that information is being serviced and you're not. Where are they? Where are the citations going? What kind of content have they got out there that means AI is showing them and not you? So it's there's a lot more scientific things to do behind that, but that's a great place to start. If you're in charge of brand or marketing or digital in your organization, just spend a couple of hours maybe just coming up with a dozen questions that your buyers might typically want to go into an AI tool and use, and then see what happens when you put those in at the moment. And then that might start to give you some clues about what you need to do next to start to address this.
My extension to that is go and talk with your ICP, go and talk to someone who's super informed about you and your products, probably someone internally. Do a Q&A with them, almost like a podcast, record it, transcribe it, then work out ways how you can use that content in multiple different channels. I would then go off and does it pass the mum test? So I would then ask your mum or your sibling or one of your daughters or kids that are connected in your life and ask them what they would search, because how people search is very differently. How people prompt is a world of difference. So try and understand and break that down. So try and get that bit by bit and phrase it in different ways. So LLMs notoriously love FAQs because that answers a lot of the questions, and they can then pull all the information together and serve the customer as that answer within their search results. I would then say, Go and speak to people who would probably be procurement or finance or someone like that, who would also search for you and find out what they would search. So you've almost got this 3D, this 360 view of how people search for you, what prompts they would use, and what information they would need. And then you've got an Amazon style answer page or product page or interactive website that people can go on and ask those questions. So whether they land on a product page and it has a lot of those answers for you, or you want to get them to go deeper and have conversations with you. So whether that's your agent or you transfer them onto the phone or live chat, these are all ways you can A, mitigate risk, but B, you can really use your customers and people connected to you for really quick turnaround and easy way of doing it. So whether it's a Google form, whether that's a recorded phone call, whether that's a Zoom or an equivalent, these are all really simple ways how you can get those style of answers and then build out on that. And you might even learn something about your different ideal customer profiles.
It's a good thing to do. I think it all comes to the health warming, Dan, isn't it? That this stuff is evolving quickly, and even if you do all that, and it's good things to do, and it all works like a charm in May, June 2026. By August, it might not work because the game's moved on again. So it's a rapidly evolving game at the moment. And as Dan said earlier, if we come back to this subject in a fortnight, we have some very different things to say because it's a rapidly evolving situation.
Yeah,
Keeps it fun though, Dan. Keeps us interested.
It does, and also it makes you question what's at the center of the system, right? So whether it used to be Google or whether something else took over, now Google are really trying to be the operating system for customers. So whether you choose Google as your preferred partner or whether you diversify and build out, hopefully we've covered enough ways for people to help have some guidance or take some action away from it while taking that step back and trying to review some of this information, because these new interfaces, these new systems are going to really re-engineer how some of us use and interact with the web.
Yeah, I think the summary for me will be: you can't ignore this. If you're a business leader or a marketing leader, sales leader, don't ignore this one. It is not hype to say it might be the biggest change in 25 years. It's going to accelerate the move to AI, and so make yourself aware of it. Reese, get reading, get watching videos. Just make yourself aware of what's happening and think about how that might impact you.
Exactly. And I'll link in the show notes and in the support and newsletter, I'll link to the marketing side of it. So the dedicated 5 experts I've spoken to, and then one of the posts I've put together as well. So definitely check that out.
And in bedtime reading. Good to see you, Dan, and I will see you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening today, everyone. If you liked what you heard, please give us a rating and review in any of the podcast players. We have a supporting newsletter, which is aimoment.co.uk, that comes out on Mondays and Fridays with every pod, and we dive a little bit deeper. So please subscribe there. Have a great week, and we'll see you soon.